Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Canada Life public webinar. Before we begin with today's topic, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm sitting in our Toronto office, which is situated on the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat nations. We acknowledge the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty whose spirit is one based in collective stewardship and sharing of land and resources, and one which extends to all nations living in present-day Toronto. Canada Life acknowledges the harms of the past, and we respect the history, people, and land in the areas we live and operate. And we're committed to building relationships and moving forward in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, guided by shared principles of respect, equality, and collaboration. If you'd like to listen to French audio for today's session, you can access French interpretation by clicking on the link that was contained in the original invite. And if you no longer have that invite, go to the event page at workplacestrategiesformentalhealth.com to find the link. And if you're doing that, please be sure to mute your computer audio as well. Our topic today is the emotional cost of caregiving, strategies for caregivers and the leaders who support them. As always, we're joined by Ann Baynton, Director of Collaboration and Strategy with Workplace Strategies for Mental Health, as well as members of the Canada Life Wellbeing team from all across Canada. I'm Laura, and today I'm joined by Laurel, Michelle, Alana, Carolyn, and Samia. As you listen, you're welcome to note your questions or comments in Slido. Visit slido.com and use the hashtag showing at the bottom of the screen, #caregivers. Also, if you have ideas of topics that you'd like us to cover in future webinars, please feel free to share those in Slido as well. And we expect to have time left at the end of today's session to respond to your questions and comments. We'll be mentioning a number of resources that are available to you throughout today's session, and we've compiled those resources into one-pagers in English and French, and we'll post those on the event page in Workplace Strategies after today's session. Laurel and Ann, I'm passing it over to you now to get us started with our first topic, caregiver resources.
Wonderful, thanks, Laura. I'm going to get us started with a quote from Rosalind Carter, former First Lady of the United States. She once said that there are 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. Caregiving is universal. So what is caregiving? It can be someone caring for a life partner, parent, child, or a dependent with special needs. It can be caring for an extended family member or even a friend or neighbor. Caregiving may be helping someone cope with activities of daily living. They may find themselves supporting the person's medical treatment, helping them make appointments, get to appointments, or advocating on their behalf with providers, agencies, or the healthcare system. It can be rewarding to provide care for a loved one, but it can also be overwhelming, confusing, and stressful, especially while working full-time. Caregivers often feel obligated to take care of others before taking care of themselves, which can lead to burnout, isolation, and depression. This is why we feel it's such an important topic to discuss, so that we can learn how to support caregivers through the stress and emotions associated with caregiving. And if you yourself are a caregiver, we hope that there will be some helpful information shared here today to help you. Ann, what assistance does the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health site offer to caregivers to help them reduce the stress associated with their role?
So Laurel, there's a lot, but I want to say first, just listening to you saying about, caregivers don't take care of themselves first. If one more person said to me when I was a caregiver, "Oh, you need to take more time and care for yourself," I think I might have lost my mind, because the thing is, you're trying to do your job, you're trying to be good at being a caregiver, and you're exhausted. And the idea that you're going to go to the spa for a day is just so far from your reality that those kinds of well-intended statements just seem like somebody saying, well, let's paint the sky green. So I absolutely loved all of the people that I've ever cared for in my life. But that doesn't mean that I didn't want to run and hide sometimes. It didn't mean that sometimes I felt like I had had enough. And so I want to be realistic when we're talking about this, that caregiving sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but sometimes it's more like uncontrolled chaos. And a lot of the things, Laurel, that we have on the workplace strategy site, so we have things, we actually have something called Caregiver Resources, which came from people giving me tips and strategies that really reduced my stress, improved my ability to care for people. We have health resources, which is when you want to learn more about the person's condition or about how you can help them. We have information there about government services. I mean, something as simple as the benefit finder. Who knew that there's one website that the government puts up where you can say what province you live in, what the condition is of the person you're caring for, what sorts of things you need, and it'll pop up with what's available. We also have information for leaders who have caregivers in their team who they really don't know how to help. And of course, whenever you read about it, it says flexibility, but sometimes that's not possible. So there's many other things there. And then Jessica Grass, who is a psychotherapist, she wrote for us the Supportive Conversation Library. And among other things, talking to somebody who's in pain or somebody who's got a mental health issue, there's talking to somebody who has a chronic disease or has a terminal diagnosis. So do we have anything on workplace strategies? Yes, we have a lot. There's also a whole section on loss and grief and the very different approaches, the different reactions that we might have to it. So yeah, Laurel, lots.
There's lots. Wonderful. And this is something, this next question is actually something that I deal with, being, far away, geographically far away from some of the members in my family. And that is that in many cases as a caregiver, you're also looking after logistic things, which may mean matters of housing, home care, or community support, a lot of which has to kind of be sourced locally. So how can you help individuals trying to do some of that from afar?
So again, that kind of information is under Caregiver Resources. But let me tell you some things that I found out is that the Red Cross often has home care services as well as equipment that they will rent. That there are, like the Canadian Cancer Society may have wheelchairs or other pieces of equipment that you can use. In many provinces, there's local health authorities. They have different names in different provinces, but they often can link you to resources. And almost all of what I've just talked about is free, or it's very low cost. There is also your own member of parliament, that if you call that office, that's what they do, is help people find resources. But when we think about politicians, we don't always think about home care or our child with disabilities, but they are more aware of what's available and more able to help you. But I have to say that some of my greatest links and connections and referrals came from friends who are in the healthcare business. So whether they were nurses or they were part of community centers that provided care, these individuals gave me a lot of information.
And just maybe wrapping up on that topic, there's quite often the challenge dealing with the healthcare system, whether or not you're somebody who's very tech savvy and is really comfortable navigating websites. But there's also paperwork, there's medication, there's doctor's appointments, and seeking second medical advice, opinions. So, of course, being in the insurance industry, most of us are very familiar and understand the importance of understanding our benefit programs, whether it's through work, association memberships, or personal insurance. Marianne, what other suggestions do you have for caregivers regarding the healthcare support?
So I found that the best thing for me was to go back to old school and have all of the information and records kept in a binder, because I had to go back to read. Somebody would give you a brochure at a time you just heard maybe that your loved one had a terminal illness. You're not absorbing the information. Things like benefits. I know so many people will read the information they have and they still don't get it. And it's to call and to say to whoever your provider is, can you explain this to me? Even with some people, if you have an employee and family assistance program, even if your loved one's not covered by it, it's only for you, you can sometimes call them up and say, look, this is what I'm dealing with and I'm overwhelmed. Is there somebody that I can talk to about what I should do? And so now you've got somebody that's paid to listen to you, but that they can also help you advocate. It's also in a lot of families that some people are really good at providing emotional support. Some people can provide financial support, but some people love that organization or advocacy to get services. And if you have that opportunity to engage other people in your family in doing different parts of the care, the parts that they feel most comfortable at, it really is helpful when everyone feels that they contributed, but that they weren't forced to contribute something that they didn't really have access to. Like being able to sit and cry with someone is not easy for everyone. And being able to navigate the healthcare system isn't easy for everyone, but we can all play a part.
That's a great piece of advice. Kind of play on the strengths of everybody and spread kind of the workload or the tasks out if you're able to do that. So I'm going to pass it over to Michelle now, who has a couple of questions for you.
Great. Sorry, Laurel, I just want to add something else that just occurred to me. Is often if you phone somebody and they say, no, I can't help you, that's not what we do. If you ask them, do you know where I could go? Do you know who I could reach out to? They may know. And that could also be a source of information that you hadn't thought about. You're just thinking, I got the wrong number and I got to try again. But because they're in the field at all, they may have good advice for you. Thanks. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you. So nutrition is an area that can be tricky. It's hard enough trying to eat healthy ourselves, let alone ensuring that we're considering the nutritional needs of others. This becomes even more challenging when that someone is an adult, such as a parent, a sibling, or another loved one. We have a link to resources for caregivers on this topic as well, such as Dietitians of Canada, Diabetes Canada, and the Heart and Stroke Association, to get specific information and meal plans. Are there other resources that might be helpful?
So there's things like Meals on Wheels, and even the Red Cross at one point was providing meals. So especially if you are a long distance care provider, that you can contact. And if the person gets one full meal a day, especially if it's somebody who's elderly, and they can make a sandwich or have some cereal for the rest of the meals, that's going to go a long way. It also means that somebody's knocking on the door and checking on them. So there's a lot of value. And even if you don't have those things, if you have the money, there's services that well, now we have Skip the Dishes and DoorDash and whatever, but there are ways that you can get meals to them. But I really want to bring up a different issue, because I have walked with a few people now at the end of their life, I realized that as the body begins to shut down, people cannot digest the same food or the same amount of food. And we often feel like if we could just feed them, they'll be stronger and we'll keep them healthier longer. And my doctor said to me, you're not doing them a favor. You're putting too much stress and strain on a body that's trying to slowly adjust to what it's able to do. And even on the issue of nutrition, when it's end of life, it's only about calories. It's not about nutrition. Give them what they want. Don't fight about food. Don't fight about how much they consume. Just make what they want available to them. And it will be a better experience for both of you. Now, of course, if the person you're caring for is somebody younger, somebody with a chronic illness, and you're trying to manage nutrition, that's a different story, because just not eating a lot is maybe going to be less helpful. But then what you want to do is say, tell me all the things that you like to eat, every food. So let's start with vegetables. Now we'll go to fruit. Now we'll go to meat. And now we'll go to baked goods. Tell me everything that you like to eat. And then try to work from that place to give them more things that are nutritional, but that you're not trying to make them like trying to make me liver and onions. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. So yeah, let's not make food a fight. Let's make it choices and just provide the best choices that you can.
Great insight. Thank you. And financial support can be really challenging. It's often a complex topic at the best of times. Workplace Strategies has done a lot of work curating resources that can be used, because it is such a big responsibility. Sometimes discussing finances can feel personal and intrusive. What are some strategies to manage this difficult topic?
You know, I really stopped and thought, what would I feel like if the little whippersnappers that I gave birth to, okay, so they're 6'2", but anyways, if somebody started telling me what I could do, started taking away my independence, started telling me what I could buy and what I couldn't buy, I don't think I'd like it very much. So the first bit of advice is be respectful. If somebody has money, involve them in the discussion and say, you know, what would you like to do? How can I help? What support would you like to have? And, you know, if they have their own financial advisors, if they have their own brokers or whatever, say, you know, would you like me to come to the appointment to help to hear what they're saying and to help you to do whatever it is you decide to do. But more than that, there is the idea about when do they want to give you power of attorney, and some of them won't, meaning give you the ability to make decisions for them financially. My mom was still very much in control of her faculties, and she said, I've never liked taking care of money and finances anyways. Will you do it now? And she certainly could have managed it herself for years after she gave me full power of attorney. And it was interesting because when we went to the lawyer to do this, he said to myself and my brother and sister were all there, you three stay here. I'm going to talk to her privately, because he wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to bamboozle her out of her money. And so all of that was taken care of in advance. But there's still so many other things that I didn't know. We had a joint checking account. And the reason that we had a joint checking account was because she said, well, then if something happens to me, you can pay the bills or do whatever. Well, if the will isn't just to the person on the joint account, it can still be frozen. So we still couldn't get at it. And there's so many of these things that when you go to our information about caregiver resources, and you can learn more, but get an advisor, go with your loved one if you can, and check that out. The other thing that I never thought about, because of course my mother was not covered under any benefits from any of us because she wasn't a dependent. So I just thought, well, we'll have to pay for whatever she can't pay for from her money. And then I started to realize she was eligible for a lot of different supports. I just wasn't aware of them. And so, from a financial aspect, get advice, look in your community, look in your province, and see what's available to people to supplement.
Great, thanks, Marianne. So Alana, I'll pass it over to you to introduce our next topic.
Thank you, Michelle. And yes, our next topic is focused on the workplaces and leader support for caregivers. We have a few stats related to caregiving and the Canadian population to share today to really set the stage that this is a very important issue for workplaces and for leaders to consider. The first study is from the Mental Health Commission of Canada. The Commission reported that nearly 17% of people in family caregiving roles report very high levels of stress. In Canada today, we have an aging population, which also means that we project higher number of people with dementia and other chronic illnesses where they would need caregiving. So logically, this means that we will see an increase in the number of family caregivers, and a very likelihood that we will see an increase in the number of Canadians experiencing excessive stress. And a good portion of those Canadians are working Canadians. The Canadian Human Rights Commission also discusses this issue. The Commission reported that 1 in 4 Canadians today is providing care to family members, to close friends. And many of us who are today or have been caregivers struggle to balance caregiving obligations with work responsibilities, which then can create issues for us in the workplace. Employers may also have concerns about increased absenteeism, stress leave periods away from work, loss of productivity, and sometimes even unpredictable workplace behavior, communication patterns, unanticipated. So Marianne, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think workplaces and leaders in particular can do to support people in caregiving roles.
You know, Alana, this is something that we've talked about for a long time, is that mental health is on a continuum from, flourishing, being at the top of your game, all the way to having a diagnosed mental illness where you're not functioning. The stress of life, of being in a caregiving role, is also going to be on a continuum. And for some people, they'll be able to take it in stride. For some people, it will take more of a toll. But from a workplace perspective, it's not much different than what we say in terms of supporting employees who have any mental health issues or stressors. And that is to be able to make work psychologically safe while you're there. Now, what does that mean for caregivers? It means, yes, that you have to understand that something could go awry at any minute. I remember vividly being in a very important meeting around the National Standard of Canada on psychological health and safety in the workplace, and getting a call that my mother, who was in hospice at the time, fell and broke her hip and was being transported to hospital. And I had to leave this meeting. There was no question that I was going to be there and not at the meeting, but it just threw everything up in the air. Fortunately, people understood my caregiving role and they were ready to step up and take over. And that's really what we need to do in the workplace, is to understand that life is going to happen to everyone, and to make it as flexible as possible, meaning that if you're in a workplace where there is absolutely nobody to cover, nobody to step up, then as a group, let's think about what are we going to do if and when this happens, because we need to think about it. The other thing I want to say about leaders is to understand that not everybody who is a caregiver does not want to be at work. Work, for me, was a refuge, right? The caregiving, I wanted to do it. I was committed to doing it, but going to work was my sanity. Going to work was the break from the emotional cost of caregiving in order to focus on something else. So we don't want leaders to think, oh, I need to give you, more time off or more. Just ask the person, how can I support you right now? What do you need to be able to do your job? Some people will want to check in 3 or 4 times a day. Other people will say, no, I'm not going to check in. Whoever are the caregivers while I'm at work, they'll take care of it unless it's an emergency. And so again, we don't want to make assumptions about what people need. We really want to just be able to respond to what they need. Some people will want to talk about their loved one and what they're dealing with, and other people won't. And we just need to take our cues from them.
Thank you, Marianne. These are great, insightful and practical thoughts. I'm going to pass it over to you, Carolyn, to introduce our third subject.
Thanks, Alana. So our third topic is really focused on the emotional cost of caregiving as the individual deals with loss and grief. So I just want to start by defining grief. Most of us know that it's a natural response to losing someone or something that's important to us. And most of us will experience grief at one time or another. But we may not all understand that grief isn't just tied to illness or death. It's also tied to loss. So you can experience a grief response for other losses, like the end of a friendship, job loss, or a change in role, a change in your financial situation, maybe having a child leave home. I know probably some folks on this call may have experienced that when they sent their children off to university or college this past month. So the loss of a dream or a goal is another area you can feel, and grief over a loss, and a change in routine or responsibilities, including the start or the end of a caregiver role. So you can also experience anticipatory grief, and that's a reaction to an event that you can anticipate or predict. So the grieving process may begin before the loss itself. This happens, for example, when a person is diagnosed with a long-term or serious or terminal illness. Grief can trigger all kinds of emotional responses that can sometimes be overwhelming and unexpected. And they're not right or wrong. Whatever loss you've experienced, it's important to know that it's okay to feel how you feel. In fact, acknowledging the loss is an important part of the grieving process. So Marianne, on workplace strategies for mental health, we say that everybody experiences and responds to grief differently. What kind of things could contribute to somebody's unique response?
Everything. So something that's really interesting for me is that when my mom, who I had been a caregiver for 5 years before she passed, when she passed, I didn't cry. And I was saying to somebody, I don't know why, like I was really close with my mom, why am I not crying? And they said, because you already broke down and had your grief moment, but it was months before, and it was when I could no longer care for her at home. I completely fell apart, just like I was the worst daughter in the world. I had failed her. I should have kept her till she passed. In retrospect, it was the absolute best thing that could have happened, because now my brother and sister had more opportunity to interact with her before she was actually gone. Who knew at that time? But what they said to me is that was my most acute moment of grief, because I lost her out of my home, not when she passed away, which was inevitable anyways. But I also want to say, that the anticipatory grief can often make people really frantic to find a cure, to find a way to preserve that life, to say, we're not giving up, we're going to fight, we're going to do this. And sometimes that works, that you find a way. In my mom's case, there was no cure. It was inevitable. We didn't know when, but it was inevitable. And after I stopped that frantic trying to figure out, is there something that they missed? I made a shift that instead of worrying about how I could stop her from dying, I would focus on how I could celebrate her while she was alive. And it changed everything for me. I started to think about every moment as what kind of memory can we make? Can we laugh several times today? Can we talk about some of the old days? Can we do things that she would find fun? And it's only because I had learned so much about loss and grief that I realized that creating these wonderful memories would not make it so I didn't miss her, but it would make it so when I thought back, there was many more good things to think back about. And I've now translated that to sort of life in general, right? We know it's all a limited engagement. And so can we make every day something that is a good memory? Can we purposefully try to create moments that we're going to enjoy? But when I look at loss and grief, there's a couple of other things I want to share. My uncle had pancreatic cancer, and I spent the last 3 months with him. And there was a lot to do to manage in terms of logistics and then for the funeral. And then I flew home. And again, I didn't have a very strong emotional reaction, but I flew home just weeks before the anniversary of my mother's death. And then I fell apart. And so sometimes it hits you at different times. And, I was told that it comes and goes in waves. And for 2 years, it's pretty much coming and going in waves. But then after that, it's just all of a sudden something will twig. The difference, of course, is that it's more purposeful, thinking back on the good memories and how can I honor the people that I've lost in terms of the way that I live now, in terms of the things that I appreciate and enjoy. And then just one other thing is I had met somebody exactly twice, and they were going to collaborate on a project that I was doing for the Canadian Mental Health Association. And this person was somebody who worked in a distress call center. And I got a call that they wouldn't be coming to the next meeting because they had passed away, they had taken their life. So somebody I had met twice, and I was devastated. It made me question all the work that I did. It made me question my existence. It made me question life in general. And people might have looked at me and said, well, you didn't even know her. Like, why are you having such a reaction? You didn't even know her. And I just want to say that the more that I've learned about loss and grief is it's not about your relationship to the person. It's about how you relate to the person. And so loss and grief are unique to us, our personality, our history, our past traumas, our past losses, our current state of health and well-being. And the more that you can accept it, almost welcome it and say, yeah, these are my feelings. I had somebody I cared about. I had something that I've lost, and I need to integrate that loss into my life and decide who I'm going to be now, and not feel like I need to pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Okay. So, well, thanks for that, Marianne. And I want to have another question here, because I think we're most familiar with grief responses like shock, sadness, guilt, or fear. But we also can observe and experience some physical symptoms like fatigue, nausea, aches and pains, weight loss or gain, and loss of sleep. So what are some ways that these responses can impact somebody in the workplace?
Well, for me, the biggest thing was brain fog. It was like, it was almost like I couldn't focus. And at the time, Carolyn, literally the day after my mother's funeral, we were writing The Evolution of Workplace Mental Health in Canada. And I was just like, oh, to the group that was working with me, you got to say that again. I didn't register. No, you have to speak more slowly, because it wouldn't happen. But the difference is I understood that that was part of grief. And so I didn't get angry at myself or beat myself up for it. I just went, yeah, that is what it is. But there's strange things that happen that we forget sometimes to eat, or we forget to drink water. And one of the things that Alan Wolfelt, that if you ever read things on grief, he's written a lot about it. He says, when you're going through that, just get a big thing of water, put it out, and just every time you see it, drink it. Don't drink because you're thirsty. Drink because you need to have that intake. And the same with food. Don't wait till you're hungry. Just say, I'm going to have a bite. I'm going to have something because I know I need to, and do that. But I think the most important advice is just to move and be gentle with yourself. Like, don't push it. Just understand that that physical slowdown is part of it, and it's okay. It's normal. It's not a mental illness to feel grief at the loss of someone.
Thank you. Samia, you have a few more questions for Marianne on this topic.
Yes, Marianne. You were just referencing Alan Wolfett, actually. And we noticed on the workplace strategy for mental health site that there's a few he's a well-known grief expert, and there's a few quotes. He pointed out some common misconceptions about grief. And I would like to read each of these quotes and, if possible, get your thoughts and opinion on these. So the first quote that is, grief and mourning progress is predictable, orderly stage. What's your thoughts on that?
Predictable and orderly, just like humans are. No, maybe if we were robots, we would be predictable and orderly, but no, grief, it hits all of us differently. You know, in couples therapy, they say one of the most difficult things after the loss, especially of a child, is feeling that the other person isn't grieving properly. And the reality is, there is no proper way, that you need to go through it in your own time, in your own way, and not be judged for not doing it right.
Thank you. The next quote was, after someone you love dies, the goal should be to get over your grief as soon as possible.
No, it's just like with other emotions. The goal is to tap into the wisdom that comes with every emotion. And grief is no different. If we're feeling grief, it means that we feel the loss of something. What did we lose? And by learning exactly what it is we lost, is it that hug? Is it that person to go to for advice? Is it the support that you had? Is it the companionship? By really examining, what did I lose? Then you have the ability to start to think about, what do I need now? How can I move forward? How can I integrate this into my life? Recognizing that whatever I lost, I once had, and aren't I fortunate to have ever had it? But to say that you're just going to move on, you never do move on. I mean, the loss is always there. What's different is the way that you will eventually look at that loss, not as the worst thing that ever happened, but to be grateful and to understand everything's impermanent. But we won't get into Buddhist philosophy now. What else have you got, Samia?
The next quote is, nobody can help you with your grief, right?
Oh my. So yes.
Or understand, right?
Yeah, not everybody needs help per se. But sometimes we have other people who love the person we lost, and they can be a great support to talk to. Sometimes in grief, we just need somebody who will let us cry and just hold space for us, meaning just to be there while we do that. Sometimes we need people who can be a distraction to us, who will pull us out and say, let's go do something. But sometimes the people around us, our family and friends, are not the right people to support us. And in those cases, there are support groups where people who are going through or have gone through what you've gone through can be there to support you. My sister-in-law is a grief counselor, and I've had people stop me on the street and say, she saved my life. I couldn't get over the loss, and she helped me to integrate it. She helped me to put things in perspective so that I can go on living. I can make a contribution. I can be there for other people. So absolutely, we can benefit from other people's support and help.
Thank you. There's much more information available on the workplace strategy for mental health about grief, but let's just focus now on grief that impacts the daily function, even when you're past the initial acute stage of grief. What would that look like, Marianne?
Well, it could look like anything. I mean, depending on the person, right? It's some people become emotionally paralyzed. So they can't make a decision. They can't change anything. Everything has to stay exactly the way it was. It could look like you can't leave the house because you're afraid of bad things happening. It can look like not trusting the world or being angry at the universe for what happened to you. Mm-hmm. And all of these reactions can be normal for a period of time. But if you find that you're not able to cope, you're not able to start to get back into life as you know it, then that's when you need to reach out for help. That although grief is normal, being unable to live life after loss, to have both the highs and lows of life, to be able to do what it is you want to do, that is not normal. And so if you find that you're not functioning, then reach out. You can reach out to family and friends first, and maybe that can be helpful. You can reach out to online resources if you don't want to leave your home to go and see somebody. Or you can go to some of these support groups or go to a therapist, but don't let your life be wasted because you're not sure how to move forward.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. That's great insight. Thank you. Ilana, do you have a couple of final questions on this topic before we move to the Q&A section?
I do. Thank you, Samia. We talked about the workplace in the context of caregiving, and Marianne, you shared that for you, work was a refuge. When it comes to grief, many people will continue to work while still trying to cope. And as we cope, we may still experience a wide range of emotions and struggle to self-care while remaining productive at work. You touched on it a bit in your response to Samia's questions, but I want to expand more on your thoughts. What are some ways that we can help ourselves at work while we are still struggling with feelings of grief?
Again, Alana, that's as unique as the individual. For some people, what they want to do is work with little or no interruptions or interactions. If the job allows for that, then you can do that. Other people feel like they don't want to work in isolation. They need people around them. And so sometimes we can modify workspaces or the situation in order to accommodate that. Some people will need an opportunity to cry, and then we just need to talk about How will that work? I had one person who was a receptionist, and crying when you're the receptionist doesn't give a good first impression when somebody's walking in. So there had to be some discussion and collaboration about what to do when that happened and how people could cover and what they could do. So in the workspace, first, it has to be a conversation. And if I'm the leader, I'm going to say to the person, tell me what you think your strengths are right now. What do you think you can do very well in spite of what you're going through? And tell me where you think the challenges might be. What are you concerned about might be more difficult for you or might be a trigger for you? And tell me how I can be most supportive to you. So it's just that conversation, because each person's going to be unique and their needs will be unique as well.
Sometimes that collaborative conversation comes easier when you are a leader. But what about peers and coworkers? What are some things that we can do without feeling that we are maybe encroaching on somebody's privacy and asking the wrong thing? How can we support our colleagues?
I think we have to understand that we should resist giving advice unless something in particular is asked of us, a question. That the kinder thing that we can do is give people an opportunity to state what they want and to share what's on their mind. That we need to be better listeners than we are advisors. So in terms of somebody, do they want us to talk about the person that has been lost? I know many people feel like nobody will even speak his name anymore because they're afraid I'm going to freak out. But he's still here in my mind, and so I wish they would. Whereas other people say, I can't hold it together right now if you speak about him, so please don't. Like, not while I'm at work. We can do it at lunch or when I'm on break. So understand that. Ask somebody, what's today like for you? How are you coping today? What's your best approach for when you feel overwhelmed, and how do you cope? Those kinds of conversations are less likely to trigger than saying, well, he's in a better place now and I'm glad that he's not in pain, because I might think, nah, I wish he was in pain and right here with me right now. So we need to do less talking and more listening.
Great. Thank you. I think that was your last question, Alana, correct? So we're going to, in the time remaining, we're going to move to the questions that have been coming in through Slido. And before Laurel starts us off with our first question, one common question that we're getting is where do we find the resources that we've been talking about today? We did create one-pagers in English and French that profile all of the resources, or many of the resources that we've talked about, and it has built-in links, so it takes you right to where you can find those resources on the site. So if you go to Workplace Strategies and you see www.workplacestrategiesformentalhealth.com, and in the search field, just put the name of this webinar and that one pager will come right up for you. So hopefully that will help. Certainly the site is very easy to navigate when you search for caregiving resources, but if you're looking for it to be consolidated, that's where you can find it. So let's move on to taking some of the questions that have been in Slido. Laurel, did you want to get us started with the first one?
Sure, thank you. And thank you everyone for your questions. They're great. We're going to get to as many as we can here. Marianne, I'm going to bundle two questions together. It's kind of a family affair theme here. And it's your recommendations on how families can perhaps start early in preparing for caring for a family member. So getting a family together and preparing for the steps that will be necessary down the road. And the second part of that question that I'm weaving into it is some family members may be ready to start those conversations and some family members don't even want to hear the topic. So how would you recommend families kind of start those conversations and perhaps start them early and address those difficult conversations together and collectively?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, some families don't have the luxury of planning because it happens so quickly. But I think that whether it happens quickly or you have time, the conversation is when this happens, what do you want to do? What sort of role do you want to take? And trying to let people step up and provide what they're able to, what they're prepared to do, so that everybody's sort of sharing the load. And then to talk about, in my case, it was me taking my mother in, and the others said they would not do it. They were not prepared to do it. They weren't going to take a turn at doing it. They didn't want to do it. And so to go in not feeling like everybody's got to do the same thing, that it's not true, but that you do what you want to do. And then the other thing is to talk about what that person, the loved one themselves, would want. That's a really important part of the conversation. And if somebody's had that, to bring it up first. The other thing, Laura, that I really want to stress is about children, that we shouldn't keep them in the dark. We need to realize that the way we treat children at a time when somebody is dying is going to impact their sense of trust in us for the rest of their lives. If they think we hid it from them, if they think we weren't being truthful with them, it can have a negative impact. Now, how you talk to them about it is important, and it needs to be age appropriate, and it needs to be what they're ready to hear. There's a whole body of knowledge on that, but just be as honest as you can and follow their lead. What would you need to know? What do you already know about this? What's your thoughts on it, and what would you like to know?
Great. Alana, I'll pass it over to you for the next question.
Thank you, Laurel. So, Marianne, going back to the workplaces, is there a way for workplaces to prepare in a similar way as families sometimes can? One thought that comes to mind is making information readily available, like about benefit packages, government programs, and so forth. Any other suggestions for workplaces?
Yeah, because I think it was Carolyn was talking about how loss and grief is going to be part of everyone's life. And just like we often will have people come in and talk about mental health or talk about financial planning or talk about whatever in the workplace, this is a very common experience that we're going to have. And to be able to talk to people about the emotional part of it, as well as the practical and logistical part of it, is a great service for employees. And there's always going to be experts in the community, whether it's the funeral home, we'll have people who could come and speak. If there's hospices, they often have people who can come and speak. Palliative care parts of hospitals, and it just help everybody to normalize an experience that they're almost inevitably going to have.
And any suggestions for workplaces and people in different roles within the workplace, leaders, human resources, and so forth, around how to approach caregivers while maintaining their privacy as they are discussing their needs?
And again, this is sort of a universal answer to the question, is to ask them, what do you want to tell people? What do you want to keep private? How do you want me to talk to people about your absences, if there are any? And what do you need from us? It's some of these things are so basic to psychologically safe leadership that they apply almost universally.
Thank you.
So I have another family affair question from the slide. How do you get along with siblings? If we all believe we know what's best for mom or dad or whoever we're caring for, but we all have different relationships with that individual. So Marianne, I think you touched on it a bit with your own experience caring for your mom, but I'm just wondering if you can help address this individual's question.
Mm-hmm. So we also really had discussions about when you're with mom, then you do the very best that you think you should do in terms of how you're going to interact. And we didn't say you must do exactly what we did. So we really tried to give some flexibility. And in some cases, it meant not wanting to see it because you just didn't agree with it. But it's okay because you're trying to let them have the experience that they need to have. It's, there's certain things that are really critical around care, and then you can agree to go to a healthcare provider for the answer. So rather than any sibling making a final decision, that you agree that this particular provider will bring it to them, give them our different points of view, and let them help us decide. So yeah, it can be difficult, but remember that everybody is experiencing a loss, and there is no competition about who loved them more. We're all going to experience a loss, and the person with the most difficult relationship is going to likely have the most difficult grief experience. So be kind.
Great. And maybe I'll have you wrap up our session. We are getting close to the top of the hour. There's been a lot of questions about the resources that you've mentioned, especially those found on workplace strategies for mental health. So when somebody gets on the site, are there any tips or tricks that you can suggest on how to navigate into some of those resources that you mentioned? There was one question specifically on the benefit finder. They wanted to know the best way to kind of retrieve that information quickly.
Yeah, so that's in caregiver resources. But of all the things that we've talked about, if you actually type in caregiver to the keyword search, you're going to get everything that's there. But if you type in benefits finder, you'll go right to the benefits finder. So, and the page that it's on. You can also, if that's what you're looking for, just go to Government of Canada Benefits Finder. That's what it is.
Great.
Thank you. So we are, as Laurel said, at the top of the hour, and that's all the time we have today. So we want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen and contribute your questions. And as a reminder, if you have feedback about today's session, or if you have ideas for topics that you'd like us to cover in future webinars, please feel free to share those in Slido. And remember to look for a recording of this session in English and French on the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health YouTube channel, available in the next little while. So thanks so much. Have a good day.